So you still have paint on your palette. Can you save it? Can you reuse it? This paint was expensive. What if you need these colors to paint tomorrow? Will they dry out on your palette? So how long? Aren't oil paints supposed to be slow drying? All of these questions will be answered in today's video. Hi, welcome to Paint Coach. I'm Chris Fornatero here to help simplify oil paint so you can get better faster. All right, before I jump in, just to let you know, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're looking for full in-depth paint tutorials, I offer those on my Patreon page, which is also linked below. Also, all you oil painters out there, if you have any other tips that I don't go over in this video, please let us all know in the comment section. I want to know about it. I'm sure everybody else wants to know about it. Share your advice on how to save paint. And lastly, at the end of this video, I'm gonna give you my secret special tip to not waste paint that you're not gonna see or hear about from any other painter on YouTube, I promise you. So stick around to the very end for my big secret tip that I use. Or you can just skip to the end of the video. All right, so you still have paint left on your palette. How long will that take to dry and be unusable? Well, that depends on a couple things. It depends on the brand of paint and also depends on the color. Brand-wise, like I use kind of two different brands of paint. I've recommended in previous videos the Winsor & Newton oil paint. It's relatively cheap, but I think it's still, good quality. There's also the Gamblin paint, which is a little more expensive. It's still gonna be the one that's probably locked away in a case at your local Michael's. Now, I have found that the Gamblin paint dries quite slower than the Winsor & Newton paint. So one could make the argument that the extra you pay for the Gamblin paint is kind of made up in the fact that you're not going to be throwing away as much paint because it's not going to dry and get crusted and unusable on your palette. So I'll let you do the math and figure out what's best for your situation on which one to use, but just know that the Gamblin paint is going to dry a little bit slower. Also, certain colors dry slow. You probably have already noticed this. You probably noticed that your titanium white is the last paint to dry on your painting. So how long does it take? I'd say 2 to 3 days. Is when it starts to kind of get a little too thick, and even if you break the seal, a lot of times the paint will get that little plastic seal over top. A lot of times you can break that and use the fresh paint underneath. That paint's not going to be discolored or unusable or anything like that. You can totally use that paint. So what if you want to save the paint on your palette? What can you do? Well, you can get some jars, airtight jars. Scoop the paint up with a palette knife, put it in the jar, bam, save the paint. Shouldn't dry at all. It should be like it's in a tube. They even sell empty paint tubes. The bottom's like open up and you can put it in there, and it's got a cap and everything. You twist up the bottom and it's just like a tube of paint. So you can do that as well. Now, if the colors on your palette are all mixed together and you can't really separate out individual colors and put them in their own little jars, what you can do is scoop all the paint into one big pile. And that's going to be a very gray toned color, which you can use as a base for other paintings. If you're painting later on and you need to neutralize something with a kind of a grayish tone, you can use that paint. You can use it as a base paint, a base color to lay down and then kind of mix your other paints into it. Like let's say if you are painting something later on and you need kind of like a brownish gray tone, instead of going back into your fresh new white, yellow, red, and blue and mixing up all those together to make some neutral brownish color, you can just start with this color that you saved and then kind of tweak it to get to whatever color you're trying to get to. So you can do that as well. Just remember when you are mixing all the paint together before you store it away into a jar or a tube, that you mix all the color up until it's one solid color. You don't want to have like any streaks of different colors in there. You really want to mix it all together into one solid color. Now let's say that you're working on a painting and you've mixed up a bunch of specific colors for that painting, but you want to paint tomorrow or you're going to paint a couple days from now. What can you do to save those specific colors? Well, you can just wrap your palette in saran wrap, or depending on the size of your palette, however you're going to cover it up, and you can put it in the freezer, and that will keep the paint from drying. Now, if you're doing this because you're afraid that you're not going to be able to mix up a certain color again, I don't think that's a good reason. Like if you've mixed up a lot of that color and you just don't want to waste that color, you can put it in a jar and save it or whatever. I understand that of not wanting to waste a big, pile of a specific color. But if you're doing it because you're worried you won't be able to match a color that you already have mixed, like don't worry about that. You'll be able to mix it again. And if you are struggling with that, that means that you need more practice mixing colors, and that way you should mix more anyway because you need the practice. But don't be afraid of not being able to mix up a color again. Like it'll be fine. You can take your time. You got the color already there on your painting, and you can keep checking it until you get it right. Now some of you have probably seen these palettes with lids. at like art stores and stuff. They're actually kind of expensive because they're just a plastic sealed box. I have one of these, and I've found that it doesn't really work in terms of saving your paint. I feel my paints dry out in the same amount of time as if I have the lid on or off. So if you see one of those and you think that will work, I don't recommend it. I don't think it's really gonna work. I mean, I still like it. I use it for plein air painting, just having a cover on my palette, but don't think that that is going to keep your paint from drying any faster. Okay, it is time for my big secret tip, the tip that nobody else will tell you. First, I just want to let you know that all of these tips that I have told you leading up to this are good tips, and I've seen many great artists use these tips. They're very common tips to save your paint. If you think they'll help you, do it. It's always great to save paint, save money. These things aren't cheap, I get it. But honestly, I don't use any of these tips that I told you because I don't need to, because I do this instead, this big secret tip that I'm telling you right now, which is I paint every day. That's the big tip. I paint every day. That way, you know, my paints aren't going to dry out in a day, so I'll paint. I'll come back the next day. My paints are still there. They're still wet. I'll keep using those until they're done. And when they're gone, I'll put on more paint. So I never need to worry about saving paint because I'm painting every day. And if you paint every day, you're going to get better, and that's the best thing that you can do. I know a lot of you saying, hey, I can't paint every day. I have a life. I have a job. I have a family. I have this and this. I know. I understand that. I don't expect you to paint every day. But that's what I do. And I just want to let you guys know that because I don't want you to think that I do all these things, because I really don't. I have done these things in the past when I haven't painted every day. I've seen other artists do it. But if saving paint is going to help you paint more because it's going to help you save money, then please definitely save paint. Utilize these tips. And again, any other oil painters out there that have tips that I didn't go over, please let us know in the comments section. I want to hear about those tips. I'm Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button. I also offer you this video and this video. Please choose one. They're both good.